Hello and welcome back to London Cycle Routes. Today I'll be showing you how to cycle from Hampstead in North London to Marylebone in Central London. This ride takes about 20 minutes and you can do the whole thing on quiet streets and protected cycle lanes. By public transport, the same journey takes around half an hour, so you can also save a bit of time by getting on your bike. If you find this video useful or you just enjoy watching it, don't forget to hit the subscribe button as I try to post new videos just like it every week. I'd also like to say a big thank you to everyone who supports the channel on Patreon. If you'd like to contribute as well, you can find a link in the description below the video. Alright, let's get going. So we're starting on Hampstead Green by the Royal Free Hospital and we're going to go down Haverstock Hill. This street recently got new cycle lanes which are protected from the traffic by these plastic wands. They're definitely a big improvement on what was here before and make the street a reasonable cycle corridor. They're currently implemented by Camden Council as a trial scheme, and if they were made permanent I would definitely make a few changes. Firstly, the protection is a little bit sparse. You might notice some quite big gaps between the different ones, such as here. And at the beginning you might have seen that I had to overtake a bus, as there's no provision at the bus stops in the downhill direction. There's also the issue of this loading bay and others further down the street, which seem to be more or less permanently occupied and force you to cycle out into the road to swerve around the parked cars. I say parked because I've never actually seen any loading going on with any of the vehicles that are using them. These gripes aside though, the lanes really are a big improvement, especially in the uphill direction, which I'm not really showing here. It's always harder cycling uphill than downhill, or almost always, and in this case there is much more consistent protection in the uphill, and the bus stops have also got shared use bus borders on them, which means you don't have to overtake a bus while cycling uphill. If Camden does a permanent version of these lanes, I'd love to see stepped cycle tracks with a curb like you see in some other lanes in Camden, and maybe see the bus stops redone so that they've got bus bypasses or borders, and those loading bays moved to the side roads around the corner so that they're not blocking the lane. You can also see here that a bit of enforcement of the double yellows wouldn't go amiss. Interestingly, these lanes were actually built in a couple of stages, so the bit we've just gone on is the most recent, but the shorter section after these lights as we approached Chalk Farm Station was actually installed about a year earlier, and you can see they're a slightly different quality. These ones here have got a much denser form of segregation, with the ones less far apart, and I actually prefer these and think that when wands are being used, this is more the level of density of wands I'd like to see. By the way, the building dead ahead of us with the sloped roof is called the Roundhouse. It used to be a railway locomotive turning shed and it's now a famous music venue. We want to turn right here, but we're going to go left first and then turn around because it's easier to do that, and then we can use the lights to cross the road and then we can go up the hill. There's usually a pavement on the left side here as well, but unfortunately the development means that it's been taken out of commission for a while, so hopefully that'll be put back in soon. This street is one way, but on the right there you can see a contraflow cycle lane for going in the opposite direction on a bike, and it has a nice generous buffer there which makes it feel almost protected. At the top of the hill we turn left over this really nice generous railway bridge where we have the West Coast Main Line for trains up to Manchester, Liverpool and Glasgow running beneath us. You then turn left again and go down Gloucester Avenue. This street is generally really quiet as it doesn't have any through traffic on it thanks to a traffic management scheme that was introduced decades ago. However, there is a lot of parking around here, and so you'll probably run into at least one or two vehicles when you cycle down here. You don't need to worry about that too much though, as we're going to turn off left in a second after this building so that we can access the Regents Canal towpath. Some people might choose to dismount and wheel their bike for this little alleyway here, although you are allowed to cycle. If you do stay on your bike like I do here, make sure you go dead slow as there is a blind corner to that restaurant on the left there, which is actually Michelin starred. The first 30 seconds of the canal towpath are very tight, particularly under the bridge as you can see there, so make sure you're considerate to pedestrians and ride really slowly for your own safety as well as theirs. The canal does have a tendency to have holes in it, and there are capstans along the moorings here which you could hit, especially in the dark if you're not visible. The canal is also just very pretty along here and you can take in the view. As you go around this bridge and the next one, however, things will improve dramatically. If you're used to the Regents Canal around Hackney, around King's Cross or the eastern side of Camden, then you might wonder why I'm directing you down here, as the Regents Canal has a real reputation for being busy, narrow and no fun at all, at least on a bike. Generally, I never recommend that people cycle down there, but this section between Primrose Hill and Lisson Grove is another beast entirely. It's, as you can see, a much wider path and there are far fewer pedestrians around, and there aren't any tight bridges either. Of course, there are downsides. There's not much in the way of lighting, although I did commute down here in the dark and it was actually not too bad. And the surface is not great either. There's different textures, and if you're on a road bike, your wheels could potentially get stuck in a rut. So I've always been very careful when I've cycled down here. But generally it's a much better experience with plenty of space to overtake and makes a useful traffic-free route for the journey we want to do. Of course, don't forget that pedestrians do go down here and they should have priority on the towpath, so make sure you're courteous to anybody you pass and leave them plenty of space. There are a few sights to see along the canal. Earlier we saw the birds' nets of the London Zoo aviary, where they keep the birds in the zoo, and we're just coming up to Macclesfield Bridge here, which looks very impressive. Unfortunately, in 1874, two boats carrying a mixture of gunpowder and petroleum ran into each other at around 5 AM in the morning, and as you might expect, that caused a massive explosion which blew up the bridge. 4 people were killed, and the noise of the explosion, which could be heard 10 miles away, apparently sent the animals at London Zoo absolutely wild. The bridge was rebuilt from the same materials, and it also apparently led to the passage of the Explosives Act 1875, which regulated the transportation and storage of explosives. Another thing to look at is on the left bank here. If you can just make out in the trees all these big villas, these are actually the back gardens of the massive mansions on the Regent's Park Outer Circle Road, which you might be familiar with if you've ever visited Regent's Park. So not only are they massive and extremely central, but they've got a really, really lovely waterside back garden. These days, however, most of them are, I think, owned by sort of oligarchs who are largely absentee, and it's very, very rare to see anybody use those gardens, which is a bit of a shame. We're now about to head under a railway bridge which carries the Chiltern main line, and if you know your railways, you'll know that that runs into Marylebone station, so we are pretty close. This is where we come off the canal, and there's actually a pretty decent pedestrian and cycle bridge which will carry us up it. We don't need to dismount here, but obviously it's a little bit on the narrow side, so you do have to be careful and make sure you can keep your bike under control, especially as you go around the corner there. As you emerge from the bridge, you might want to take a little look down the canal because the view is really nice. Now, you can go out to Lisson Grove if you continue down this path, but we're going to go into this estate called Casey Close, and this is actually going to be the most direct and quietest route to get us to Marylebone station. Although there's quite a lot of car parking, these streets that we're in, at least for now, are mostly cul-de-sacs and dead ends, so you shouldn't really run into very much traffic, although you might see the odd person accessing their homes, as it is very dense and there are a lot of homes around here. By the way, if you're enjoying the video, make sure you hit subscribe, as I post ones just like it every week, and let me know in the comments what you'd like to see and also what you think of this route. If you really like the channel and you really like what we're doing, you could always consider contributing to the Patreon, which keeps the channel running, and I'm really grateful to everyone who does that already. Thanks very much. We're now on Harewood Avenue, approaching Marylebone station, and this street is quiet enough, although I have seen cars go down it quite fast sometimes, so some sort of traffic calming, maybe a bus gate and cycle-friendly speed humps would probably help out a bit. If you're familiar with the area, you'll see Marylebone on your left there. It's the red brick building, and it's actually quite a lovely station. As we go around the corner into Malcolm Place, you'll see that original glass roof there sheltering the cab rank, and then you go under that and you'll find yourself in the forecourt, and the main entrance is just there. You can cycle right up to it. Isn't that great? You can see right onto the platforms just there. So we've made it. in just 20 minutes, and it was pretty pleasant as well, I think you'd probably agree. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I post new videos just like this every week. Let me know in the comments what you think. I'm interested in what you thought of the Regents Canal in particular, and also those cycle lanes on Haverstock Hill. Are they good? Could they do with a bit of an improvement? What do you think of the bus stops? That kind of thing. Yeah, I'll see you again next week. Goodbye.